Hey everybody, welcome back for Season 2 of the Broken Banquet Podcast. This season we've got more interviews with missionaries around the world, more interviews with authors who have written amazing books about missions, and more conversations about what it means for us to abide with one another. And yes, probably a story or two about Ashley taking a walk, eating food, or having drinks with someone who she now loves. We're so glad you're back, we're glad to be back, and we hope that you will enjoy this episode.
Perfect.
Snotty today.
Hello, Ashley.
Hello, Will.
How are you besides snotty today?
I'm doing just fine, thank you. It's a beautiful Costa Rican morning. Yes, listeners, I am sitting beside and poking Will Bailey.
Yay for poking. It's only 7 o'clock in the morning here. It's maybe 80 degrees already. It was close to 100 yesterday. It has been probably the hottest dry season I can remember since I moved here. It's hot enough that even Costa Ricans are complaining about how hot it is.
Well, you kind of got me excited about it being rainy a few weeks ago. You said it had been the first big rainstorm already.
That was that day.
Yeah, and so I was a little excited, thinking that maybe it wouldn't be like this. But no, I sweated so much yesterday. I think part of my top layer of skin came off.
Mm-hmm. Could be. Yeah, we're hopeful that within the next few weeks, maybe it's going to cool off and we'll start getting some rain, because it has been extremely hot and extremely dry, and we're extremely tired of it.
Well, I'm glad we could be stereotypical and talk about the weather this morning.
Yeah, well, I mean, we do usually catch up with, the weather in Shreveport and the weather in Costa Rica before we have because, people need to know.
Well, good. I'm really excited to be here with you. We have a great team from the church, and I'm happy to have families with us, and they seem to be having a wonderful trip thus far.
Yeah, I was talking to there's a couple that's here with their daughter who's 11, and I was telling them last night what a surprise that's been for us. When we were thinking about this ministry early on, it didn't occur to us that families would come like as complete family units. And for us to watch family units experience this together as a family, and moms and dads and sons and daughters spending the week doing things that they probably don't have a whole lot of time to do together just in their normal lives. Speaking of families.
Oh my goodness. Flawless, seamless segue.
This is it's almost too easy now, Ashley. Would you like to introduce, is there anything else you would like to mention this morning before you introduce our guests?
So my segue was going to be, Will, do you know how much I love my dad?
I do.
Yeah, I love my dad so much. And as I've grown older, I think we've gotten immensely closer because we have this shared love of basketball and all things sports. But on our podcast today, we have a father-daughter couple. Mm-hmm. Seamless transition into John Woodward and his daughter Lissy. And we're so thankful that they have chosen to be on the Broken Banquet podcast today.
Welcome to the Broken Banquet, John and Lissy.
Thank you very much. Good to be back. And you guys are really good at this.
The banter. It's just so natural, Hey, and before we get into, the hard-hitting topics that we're going to cover this morning, I just want to say, Lissy, you have the perfect name for either a series of children's books or like a Disney kids show where Lissy Pixley is, the heroine. Like, that's just the perfect fun name for that. Because I have a 10-year-old daughter and she watches those kinds of shows and reads those kinds of books, I could just imagine this series of the adventures of Lissy Pixley, books on her. So I don't know if you ever considered writing children's books about yourself and your, adventures in ministry, but there might be something there just based on the name alone.
That would make a great name for a unicorn, wouldn't it?
It would make a good unicorn name. Actually, it's funny. When I was growing up, you get your first email address as like a middle school kid. Back then, that was when you've got your first email address. And so I chose Pixie Wings 7. And so the fact that I got to then get the last name Pixley, which is basically the same as this email that I had chosen, it was just like incredible. So I've been waiting for this my whole life.
Prophetic.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yes.
Well, our listeners, of course, I'm sure already have recognized John Woodward's voice and his name and remember him from season 1 when we interviewed John, and then John came back and co-hosted a couple of times. But John, would you like to sort of introduce yourselves, the two of you, really quickly so everybody has an idea of who you are again, and then introduce your daughter to us?
Absolutely. So I am just retired from 40 years of ministry. Pretty exciting. Kind of adjusting to this new life. But I did 23 years of campus ministry in Iowa. And during that time, I had 2 children. Lissy's our oldest and Ethan's our youngest. Did a number of wonderful things as they were growing up. Lots of traveling. Actually did a couple mission trips with Lissy when she was in high school and college. And then did the same with my son as well. Few years I've been working with 2 different mission organizations, one for God's Children. I worked in Romania and did some work with Lakota kids. And then more recently, I just finished up work with South Pacific Christian Fellowship, where we worked over in Australia, New Zealand. And many of the people on the Broken Banquet have been interviewed from the ministries that I've been involved in over the last few years. My wife, who's been very much involved in all the ministries I've been involved in over the years, she is a teacher of the blind. She retired, 6 months ago as well. So we're starting a new adventure in our lives as well. So how's that for short and sweet?
That was super short and wow, you introduced Lissy, and we'll invite Lissy to introduce herself too.
Oh, this is going to be fun.
Yeah.
When we had settled in Ames, Iowa to do campus ministry, 1985, 2 years later, Lissy came into our lives. I had grown up with 3 brothers, and having grown up in a totally male household, I really liked the idea of having a daughter. But my thought was because I had all these brothers, I was probably going to have a son. And so back then, we did not know the gender of our babies until they were born. And so when Lissy was born and I discovered I had a daughter, was one of the happiest days of my life. I think and Will, you can attest to this, every father should have a daughter. They're the best things in the whole world. And it's funny, I've talked to a lot of people, and they're like, oh yeah, daughters are so hard. It's much easier to have. It's like, no, we'll take a daughter any day. So Lissy was like the ideal child. She slept, early and all night long.
Still do.
And she rarely did anything wrong. And if she did anything wrong, all you had to do was look at her and she'd break down in tears and ask forgiveness. And so never had any problems with her. And I thought, this is so easy being a parent. And then I go to the grocery store and you see parents, yanking their kids through the store and yelling at them. And I'm going, what's wrong with you? How don't you know how to parent? Then 4 years later, God gave us Ethan. And I all of a sudden felt really bad about my attitude towards all these parents over the years, because Ethan was the exact opposite. He did not understand the word no until he was about 6 years old. But the funniest part of all this, and I can say this, with no problem, is when Ethan had his first daughter, she was rambunctious, full of energy. And Ethan came back to us and said, Mom and Dad, was I this bad? And we just kind of smiled and went, yeah. So, yeah, now he understands. So 2 children, and we lived in Ames the entire time. Lissy went to University of Iowa after high school, which was the other university. We worked at Iowa State. And so she was radical to go to this very liberal and just awful, dark place of University of Iowa. But she got involved in the campus ministry over there, part of our larger campus ministry I was involved in, and was very active in that. And then I left campus ministry the year my son went to college, which was the year Lissy graduated. And then 4 years later, the campus ministry in Ames, Iowa, offered her or asked her to come and do ministry there. And so her and her husband moved back to Ames, and they have been doing, well, Lissy's been involved in campus ministry for the last 10 years. Been married for how many years now, Lissy?
We're almost to 13.
13 years. So she's been doing ministry there, and my wife and I moved over to Omaha when my son started college, and he was perfectly fine that we left town so he could go to college without us being in the same town. So that all worked really well. So yeah, Lissy, just because of her involvement in campus ministry and just really just had a real passion of ministering to people and being involved with people, they just saw her as having great potential to do ministry. And when they brought her on board, she has just been doing great and amazing ministry there in Ames, Iowa.
Is that how you remember the story, Lissy?
Yeah, it's pretty. I mean, I am the best child, so that was all true. As all older siblings think about themselves and remind their younger siblings pretty often. Yeah, I went to the University of Iowa. I had thought about going to Iowa State, and then the person who was doing campus ministry at the University of Iowa, I believe whatever campus ministers tell me, and he said, I think God will challenge you more if you step out of your comfort zone and you get away from the place that's your home and try it out over here. And I didn't have a lot of life direction at that point, so I thought that sounded like good advice. And so that's the one place I applied. And I went, and the first week I called Dad and I said, please come and pick me up. This is the most awful, terrible place. And he said, no, go find the campus ministry and you'll find people. And I am an extrovert. So sitting alone in a dorm room, not knowing anyone was, probably the most torturous activity I had done in my entire life. And Dad was right. And I was graduating and I had studied health promotion. And so that's undergraduate. You would go eventually to do a master's in public health.
Okay.
So nutrition and, we talked about spiritual health and physical health and mental health, all of those things. And so I didn't realize that God was kind of preparing me to mostly focus on the spiritual health. But I was looking for a job when I graduated, and I'd always worked at Panera Bread. So I was just working and hanging out because I loved my friends in Iowa City. The position came open, and, God and I had been wrestling. And again, I was sitting in the campus ministry office, and the campus minister there, Roger Charlie, was like, oh, we have this position open at Iowa State. And I didn't realize he was joking, but he jokingly said, well, you should apply, because I had been a campus ministry baby. And I was like, oh, that's so funny. Ha, ha, ha. And I left the building that day. And then just for days and days after, I just heard God saying, well, maybe you should apply. And I said, no, that's not the plan. That's, I told you not back to Ames. And I wrestled with it and I said, okay, I will apply. And when I don't get it, then I can move on with my life and do the things that I thought I was going to do. And then I showed up to my interview and the campus minister's wife brought cake. And there was one of my fellow CCF people from Iowa State that was on the board. And I found myself interviewing and then getting the job. And I thought it was really great because I tell college students a lot, there are certain things that you should think about when you're thinking about your future. They're like, oh, you have to have your dream job and move to your dream place. And I said, what are your most important things in your heart? And for me, I did not want to be stuck in an office. That sounded awful. And I wanted to be able to travel because Dad had given us the love of travel. And I was like, if I have to give that up, that just doesn't seem like a fulfilling life to me. And so God was like, well, I'm going to send you back to Ames, which you told me no, but I'll give you all the other things. And so it's been great. I get to go and have coffee with students and I get to travel the world. And so I have loved it so much. And so I'm very, very grateful to be on this path. And I don't know what I would do besides this. So I think I'm just going to keep on keeping on.
I'm really curious because I see so many similarities between sort of your growing up experience and missionary kids' experience. I mean, it's kind of the same thing. I think you can certainly consider college campuses a mission field. Are there things, you mentioned being a campus ministry baby, are there things that you remember specifically from growing up in that environment? It's not a normal environment, for a young child to grow up surrounded by college kids. Were you sort of, I'm imagining you as kind of like the mascot of this ministry. Is that accurate? Or John, did you all kind of make an effort to because there's some scary stuff on college campuses, and did you all try and kind of keep her away from that, or were you, Lissy, in the middle of it? Just is that what growing up was for you? Like Isabella is growing up here at the Missions and Ministry Center. That's what she's going to remember from her childhood, is this place and all these teams coming through and all that kinds of stuff. Are there similarities there for you?
According to Dad, one of his memories that I don't remember is, I guess we were sitting around a table, and certain Sundays of the year we would have college students over for lunch after church. And so apparently they were all sitting around the table, and I would ask them to do something and they would do whatever I asked, just make a silly face, and they'd make a silly face or jump up and down. And so I was always in the middle of it. I remember being in these old rickety vans with Dad, and we'd break down in the middle of the street while we were trying to get it ready for mission trips. And I learned about Veggie Tales from college students. They were really into Veggie Tales, probably when I was late elementary school, and they would sing all the Veggie Tales songs. And I was like, what is this? This is incredible. And so, and I was in a lot of weddings. And so I didn't remember anything scary from campus, because to me, college students were these cool, amazing people who loved Jesus, who welcomed me. And, they were my babysitters. They were kind of my everything. And so there's still people that I look up to today who I have relationships with. And because of Facebook, I get to see them having kids. And now having my own kids, I'm reliving that too. So they're campus ministry babies. And like on Friday, we went and played at the church. We do an open gym for college students. That way we have a little bit more sporty kids this time around. And so we thought, well, let's give them a space where they can play and invite their friends and be missional. And so we were playing badminton, and I had to bring the kids along because that's just how it happened. And students tend to come out more if they know the kids are going to be there, because it's kind of a back and forth discipleship of, this is what family looks like, and they love my family just as much as I do. And so,
yeah, we very much had a household that was constantly invaded by college students. And as Lissy said, on Sundays when we were around, we would have like 10 college students come over for lunch and have this huge banquet table with all these college students. And our kids, I think, really enjoyed it. I mean, the fun part of doing campus ministry is I had a group of babysitters all the time for my kids. They all got to know the college students. College students were in and out of the house. Just very normal life for them to interact with them. The wonderful part about Iowa State University is that the university is kind of off to one side of town. It's its own separate unit, and then there's the rest of the town. And it's really interesting when the kids grow up there, because they know the university's over there, but they are not really a part of it. And I met some of the students who attended Iowa State that grew up in Ames, and they're like, until I was a freshman, I never came onto campus. I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know any of these buildings. I think growing up in Ames, that they really weren't affected by the things that were happening at the university at all. It was a whole different, separate world. We would take the kids on campus. I think I had more familiarity with the campus than most other kids who attended there.
Dad also learned to braid hair from the college students. And so that is a skill that Mom does not have. But Dad spent time like in the vans or when we were traveling places with the students, and they taught him how to do it. And so that was something that Dad and I did together, because he had spent that time wanting to be able to interact with this little girl that he had. And so up until I graduated, Dad would still do the hair braiding for me, which is really, really cool.
John, when you started to realize that Lissy was leaning towards campus ministry, at any point did you think, oh no?
Well, I think she did call me when they had asked her about it. And I think I was blown away because I did not see this coming at all. So she had been out of college for a couple of years at that point. I think I was more pleased and proud of her that they had seen in her, the qualities of a person who could minister and have the gifts and talents to do that, to be able to be asked. So I think I was just more blown away, but I don't think there's any, second thoughts about it. I think the thing that I realized very quickly on, because I tell people that I left campus ministry because I had done it for 23 years and had it was a long time to be ministering to these young people. And there were a lot of students who came in, they were around for 4 years, and you had new students come in, and just going through that rotation year after year after year. After 23 years, I was just very tired. And I think I had kind of worn out on dealing with all the issues. I mean, the issues seemed to be getting worse and worse with college students, and I was getting really, really weary, and I knew I needed to step out. Then I thought, when I stepped out, it was like, oh, I'm finally done the campus ministry. And then 4 years later, my daughter starts doing campus ministry, and now she's calling me, and I have to deal with the issues that she's dealing with the campus ministry. And it's like, oh no, I really haven't left campus ministry. So I feel like I'm still doing campus ministry through my daughter. But the joy of it has been the fact that we have, this shared ministry that we can do together. So it's been a delight to know my daughter knows that she can come to me and ask questions, and she knows I understand frustrations that she's feeling. And so she can come and cry, and I can walk her through that because I've been there and done that. So I think it's been a real pleasure and just added to our relationship as father and daughter to share the ministry together.
Lissy, I think you mentioned in a previous conversation that you and I had, aren't there students that are in your campus ministry now whose parents were in that same campus ministry when John was the campus minister?
Yes. This is one of my favorite facts, and I hope we would talk about this. I think when you do campus ministry, like Dad said, you have this rotation, and some students you get for 4 years, some you get for like 2 years, some don't know what they're doing with their lives, and so they stay in school for like 7 years. Some get 1 degree, and some get several degrees, but you're pouring into them, and I think that's the most tumultuous time of people's life usually, and so you pour into them, and you think, like, are they going to make it? And you pray that God will do a good work after they leave, because usually they haven't really come to understand their relationship with God fully. Like, as they're seniors and leaving is when they get it. And then they move on, and you're like, oh no, I was so excited for you, but now I have to gift you to someone else. And pray that the next place that they move, hopefully into a church community, hopefully into a body that will encourage the growth that they've already had, that'll follow up. And so there have been a lot of students that graduated when I was probably in elementary school or early middle school who had children as I was graduating from high school. And so all these children are starting to go to Iowa State, the University of Iowa. And for the past 4 or 5 years, we had an alumni's son who, I think the mom was the original person to get Dad to go to Romania on one of the first mission trips. And so the faithfulness of their family, their son came to Iowa State and did trips with us and was one of our leaders. And this year we have a couple of other students who are second generation students. And it's fun to talk about their sharing their CCF memories, and they're encouraging their kids just in the ways that they were encouraged. And then coming up next year, we even have 2 more kids who are going to Iowa State whose parents were alumni. And so it's just an incredible story of faithfulness, like God's faithfulness and what Dad did, and the faithfulness of the hope and just the strength of the character that those people had, that now it's generational.
Well, and a testament to relationship too, right? That the relationships that John, you formed that have carried over the years, because you're a hard person to shake. People keep in touch with you all the time from all over the world. And so the fruit of that relationship now coming down through the generations, what a testament to relationship.
Don't ruin that, Lissy.
I know it feels like a lot of pressure. It doesn't actually, because I know that God does the hard work, and so I'm just get to be faithful, and God will be faithful afterwards. So when I first started ministry, I think I put a lot more of that on myself, that my hard work and the things that I'm striving for will either make or break these people's relationships with God. And so when they ghosted me, which happens more and more every year just because of the nature of young people, I was thinking, what have I done wrong? What am I failing at as someone who's ministering to these students? And I've found throughout the years that really there's something in their heart, and they don't want to show up to a place where God is, where they will maybe have to change. And so when they've come to a point where they said, I'm at the end of the rope with my sin and I'm ready for something different, then they show back up. And then they say, thanks for not forgetting about me. Because usually, we'll send them a couple texts just to remind them, like, we're still here. We haven't moved. God hasn't moved. Maybe you have, but God's going to show up, and we'll show up the second you're ready to come back. And that was a huge weight that was lifted off. And I had to talk to Dad about that, because that's just a lot to carry. When you do a 9-to-5 job where you're in an office and you check in and out, that's not a big deal. But someone's, soul, that's a lot to carry. So it's nice to have Dad who I can be like, these are soul issues that I need to talk about. And how do you carry that? And he's very good at listening.
He's the best listener. I am not, because I've been sitting here ever since you talked to Veggie Tales of he stayed at the drive-thru till sunrise. He may have dozed off once or twice when he spotted a billboard for Denny's, bacon and eggs for half price.
Cheese.
How could he resist such an offer?
Join in, Will, anytime.
I have to admit that I missed out on the entire Veggie Tales phenomenon. I'm aware
There's still
of it,
time.
but yeah, sounds good. Thank you.
All week long, Ashley can fix this problem.
What in the world does Isabella not know Veggie Tales?
I know. I was going to say that too.
Because
What kind of?
Spanish too.
Yeah, it just never really, it's just not really a thing.
Oh my gosh.
Well, the funny part of the VeggieTales story is that it was the college students that introduced me to VeggieTales. When they first came out, the college students were just totally enthralled with this. And then it was like, oh, these are for kids. Maybe my kids might like these. They're just not for college students. So you should get into it, Will. There's good theology involved.
Yeah, the couple of books I'm reading right now, I'll put them on the shelf and switch to VeggieTales for a season.
Yeah.
I am all in on this.
VeggieTales song of the day every day you're down there.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
Oh, this is gonna be the best. Oh, I'm sorry, I have to look close to the microphone.
Barbara Manatee is tomorrow.
Oh, Barbara Manatee, bittersweet.
Okay, you're losing control, Will.
Oh my gosh.
That happened a while back.
Well, here's what I was also going to say is back to the very, very beginning. What I was saying, I love my dad. I love my dad so much. I have learned so much from him. I'm so thankful for his mentorship, for his leadership, for his listening, for his words of wisdom. And when I first met John over 10 years ago now, and we were walking in Kensington Gardens, he talked about Lissy, and he talked about your relationship, and it reminded me so much of my relationship with my dad, and I lit up with that. And so then fast forward 8-9 years later, and I finally get to meet Lissy in person to go see the Tom Wright, NT Wright in Houston. When I met you for the first time, I saw John in you. Like I haven't seen two people who mirror each other so well as I thought like my dad and I do. Mm-hmm. And it just made me love you two even more. to see the relationship that Christ has kindled between you and molded between you. And then now that you get to experience ministry together and walk that path together, what a joy and a blessing that is. And I've loved following that story of yours, because I don't think I've heard much of that before, of you coming and following in your dad's footsteps, literally, and being in the same job that he had at one time. So I love your story.
I'd love to switch gears a little bit now that we kind of have the story of how you got, both of you kind of got to where you are. If we can talk about missions, and starting with you, John, why just on a basic level did you think it was important when you were in campus ministry to get young people looking outward? And then I'm curious to know, Lissy, how much of that you learned from John, how much of it translates into now you getting your students to look outward. You're coming together to Costa Rica later on this year. And so I'm just interested to know, starting with you, John, why you put a premium on getting students looking outward.
I think it probably started with my experience overseas and working in Eastern Europe. And I think from that experience, I really understood that my perspective on the world, on the church, on Christianity, what God was doing in the world, totally changed by my going cross-cultural, interacting with Christians in different parts of the world. And for me, I mean, it was an experience of meeting persecuted Christians under communism, and meeting some of the most amazing, God-fearing, suffering servants, and put a whole different perspective on my life, because I realized, my goodness, I had nothing to complain about compared to what these people were going through. And just to realize how much bigger God was and how much more God was doing in the world than I ever understood from that. And so and my wife and I were over in Eastern Europe for 2 years, and that short time period was life-changing. And also through that experience, God showed me where I was supposed to be, and that's how I ended up in campus ministry. And so when I got to doing campus ministry, that was something I really wanted to do. But one of my ideas always with campus ministry was that you needed to have students buy into what you were doing. And so though I wanted to take them all on mission trips and wanted to make them all go on mission trips, I knew it had to come from them at some point. And so Lissy had mentioned about Heidi, one of her students' parents that met in our campus ministry. About 3 years into campus ministry, Heidi came to me and said, "Can we take a mission trip?" And for me, it was like, yes, finally, one of the students is coming forward wanting to do this. I said, yeah, let's do it. And I said, where would you like to go? And she said, Eastern Europe would be great. And it was like, I got to go back to Eastern Europe. It was like, this is all working really well. But from that point, we started taking regular, about every other year, trips with the college students. But again, for me, it was these college students that would come to university, they think they know everything. They've got the world figured out. They've got their lives figured out. They know what they want to do. And most of them really don't. They don't have any idea of what God could really do in their lives if they understood what God was really doing in the world. And so for me, it was, if I could get the students to get out of their comfort zone, out of their little world, out of the Midwest, their small town thinking, and give them an experience of the world, meet Christians in other places of the world, see work, be involved in work in other places in the world, see what God is doing, they might begin to understand maybe God has something bigger for them, something much greater than they ever thought, much different than they had ever imagined through that experience. And so what I saw over the years was that, in fact, that's what happened to a lot of these students. They would go on mission trips, and it would totally transform their lives. They would come back with a whole different perspective on what God wanted them to do with their lives, or even the potential of what they could do with their lives that they had never considered before. And so just opening young people up to possibilities, to new opportunities, to bigger vision of what they could do with their lives, for me was the whole idea of doing the mission work. And again, a lot of that was just really connecting with people and being involved with people in different parts of the world, and to realize, there's lots you can do beyond your little world that you had grown up in.
And I think because that was Dad's culture that he really took on for the campus ministry when I joined, I just carried that culture over because that was what I had seen practiced. And, that's a deep understanding I had. Like Dad said, we had gone on several trips together. And so not only had I heard him say these things, but I had seen the fruit of it. One of my favorite students in the world became a missionary down in Venezuela. And Sarah was someone that I just thought was an incredible person. And she is redhead and probably the whitest person from Iowa you've ever seen. And she moved down there because God called her, and she married a Venezuelan, and they just did ministry alongside each other. And we got the opportunity to go and visit. And I was just blown away by the fact that someone from Iowa, because they had an opportunity to go and be involved in missions, God could get a hold of their heart and maybe call them to be able to go. There was another student, Nettie, who Dad took on several other trips to Europe. And because of the love of missions that she got on those trips, she ended up working in San Francisco with gang members. What we've taken on now is we want to go to places where we have relationships with, because we really believe in continuing to partner with people consistently, because we want them to see that it's not just us who's helping someone else, but it's that church feeding back into us, and really the back and forth of the church, loving the church and helping to serve the church in different areas. And like Dad said, I think it's incredible to go over to Mexico, to go over to Europe and see people just worshiping the same God that you worship in probably worse circumstances, but loving him with their whole heart. And I think that's just inspiring when they come back to say, like, if they can love God in their circumstances, there's no reason for me to not love God where I'm at. And now we also think about there's two types of students that we want to pour into. One, where God may call them to go somewhere incredible and distant, and give them those opportunities. But we also want the other students to realize there are things that they are doing there that they could come home and do, that they can participate in their local communities, and just giving them the skills. So we want them, when we do missions, to be involved in, maybe it's the hard labor and saying, like, I could go into my community and find a house that I can help to build now. Or if we do food kitchen work, like, oh, when we get back home, there's food kitchens, or I could start one in my future church and I can go and serve those people. And another thing that we've also been thinking about is serving under different types of leadership. Iowa is just very white and not very diverse. And so one of the things we've added into our rotation is going to Chicago and just being under the leadership of some of our African-American brothers and sisters, to show, like, this is what they're dealing with. This is how we serve under people who are different from us. And that is awesome and okay, and encouraged. And I think that just bridge building, like Dad said, to see people the way God sees people, when kids from small town Iowa have never experienced that before.
Can I just throw in a quick comment here?
No.
Lissy is really impressive, isn't she?
Yes. Yes, she is.
And one of the reasons I love campus ministry is the fact that it was an opportunity to show young people that even if they don't go to Bible college, even if they aren't called to full-time ministry, they can still have dynamic Christian lives that minister to other people. And so Lissy has had no formal theological training whatsoever. And so all that she's talking about and all she's done has been through the training she's gotten through campus ministry, through life experiences, through going places and doing things. So I think she's a great example of what campus ministry can do for young people that may not be called to full-time ministry, but can truly grow and be involved in all kinds of ministry, no matter where God calls them. Mm-hmm. Just a plug for campus ministry.
Yes, we're looking for lots of campus ministers on our different universities. So I think that's a huge prayer point is we're not seeing a lot of people going into campus ministry. And when I look at our college campuses, probably 10%, maybe max 15% of students are involved with anything relating to religious life at all, including just a Sunday visit. And so it is pretty much an unreached people group. And so we're praying for ministers because we do fundraising, support raising, just like a lot of other missionaries do. And that's a big barrier for people in the States when you could just go work for a church and have them pay the salary. Being on campus full time and being there with the students is just one of the most incredible things you can do. And so that's a big prayer that we have, that God would send out more workers to what is our mission field.
Well, I just want to say how thankful we are that you all are going to come this year to be part of this ministry. And when I think back to when John started campus ministry all those years ago, and this kind of process and vision that you had, John, for why it mattered and why it was important to get students thinking about these kind of things and exposed to those kind of things, and how that formed Lissy's understanding of why those things were important, and how our ministry here in Costa Rica get to be a part of that vision that you two share for campus ministry. And our hope is the same every week, that by being here and worshiping with us and praying with us and serving with us and experiencing fellowship with your brothers and sisters here in Costa Rica and having a witness in this community and seeing the local churches witness in these communities, that people's lives will be changed. And, it may be a brand new experience for some of them. It might be something similar to things they've experienced in the past. Regardless, we hope that, maybe the word church will mean something a little different for them when they go back to Iowa or wherever they've come from. And so we're just really, really thankful that we get to be a part of your vision for ministry on these campuses and with these young people. And we can't wait to have you here.
Yeah, I'm excited to bring the group down or be with the group when they come down as well, because I have told them so much about the ministry that you do there, Will, and how well you deal with teams and help them understand the bigger picture of what they're involved in. And it was funny because I talked to Lissy's director yesterday, and she said, we really didn't vet this mission that we're going to Costa Rica with. And and she said, we just kind of took it on your word that it was okay. And so I said, yeah, you're going to be really, really impressed and have a great experience because of the experience I've had down with you as well. So that put her to ease.
That's why she's the director. She asks good, hard questions like that. And I'm just like, again, I listen to whatever the campus minister said. So Dad says we should do it. I was like, great. That sounds great. Let's do that.
I was going to ask, what's the biggest lesson that you've learned from each other in your time in ministry? Maybe that was it. You just listened to whatever the other said.
Well, I think having children of my own, there's this pressure, right, that you as a Christian parent have to do all of these actions. Like I know for myself that I don't need to earn salvation, but there's this idea that if you want your kids to follow Jesus, you have to do all of these things and make sure they're doing their devotional and make sure they're praying all the time and things like that. And what I've learned from Dad is that that you disciple through your life, and you bring them along. And so Mom didn't set us down every morning and they're like, we're going to read our Bible. But my brother and I are faithfully working for Jesus. And so that's what I'm working on, teaching the students, is discipling through life. And that makes the biggest difference. It's not about the actions that we do. It's about the life that we live.
How can I follow that up?
Sorry.
The thing I learned early on that I'm so glad kind of God gave me this direction as a parent. When we were expecting Lissy, I went to a friend who is a family therapist, a Christian family therapist. I said, Bob, I have no idea what I'm doing. Can you give me some good books that I can read so I can be a good parent? And he said, just follow, what your instincts, your heart of what God has placed on you as what makes a good parent. And he said, if you have problems, then read a book. And he said, most of the families that he dealt with problems, it was because parents would read all these different books on parenting that had contradicting ideas of how to parent, and they would argue over the best way to bring up their kids and just mess up their kids. And so I read one book about parenting. It really wasn't about parenting. It was called The Blessing. And it basically used Abraham's idea of passing on the blessing to the eldest son. And the idea that we as parents are to pass on a blessing to our kids. And the person who wrote it described the blessing as being, you need to pass on to your children the sense that they are really, truly loved, that they are special, that they're significant, that they're valuable and worthwhile. The whole goal of a parent is to give your child that sense of confidence that they are loved and cared for, that they don't have to go anywhere else to find love or appreciation, which is why most of the college students I dealt with were getting into trouble because they were looking for love in all the wrong places because their parents hadn't given them that sense of love and value. And so that was my goal. And I'm so glad I had that clear idea of what it meant to be a parent. So my goal was I was going to love on my kids. I was going to make sure my kids knew that they were loved. And I think Lissy would testify that she knows Dad loves her. And I think because of that, we just lived that in everything we did, is to make sure kids knew that they were loved. And I think, as Lissy would testify as well, we, through our lives, just lived. I mean, our Christian life wasn't separate from our work life, our social life, etc. It was all seamless. We lived Christ in everything we did, and that's what we demonstrated to our kids. So it wasn't like, oh yeah, we went to church on Sunday, but then lived totally separate lives the rest of the week. And so I think that's what they saw and experienced. And we just prayed a lot for our kids. So I don't take any credit for how Lissy and Ethan turned out. I'm just very blessed, that God worked in their lives and brought them to this place. Just glad to have been a part of their growth and development and to share this life together.
Amen.
Well, this episode has had it all. We've had laughter, we've had singing, we've had tears, we've had amazing stories of ministry, we've had beautiful stories of abiding in relationships, we've had mission work and partnerships. I don't know what else to say.
Thanks for joining us on The Broken Banquet. And it's been so easy. This has been just such an easy conversation to have with you guys. And we thank you for your time and for spending this morning with us. John, we know you guys are anxious to get on the road, and we won't hold you up any longer. But thank you both for joining us this morning. And can't wait to see you in Costa Rica. You'll be here before you know it.
Oh, yes. Looking forward to it.
Thanks. This will be a great memory to have and to be able to listen back to for years and years.
Hope so.
We hope so. We love you guys, and we're so thankful for everything that you are doing for Christ in the world and for missions and for the love of family. So thank you.
Bye, John. Bye, Lissy.
Bye, Will. Bye, Ashley. Bye, Lissy. Love ya.
Bye, big lizard on the wall that's been crawling around for a long time. Bye.
You lizard.
You've been listening to The Broken Banquet, a podcast by Will Bailey and Ashley Goad. Music provided by Irene and the Sleepers. Join us next week for another episode. He's prepared the table. All things are ready. Come to the feast.